Hello and welcome to the Trust Psyche live stream. My name is Travis DiRuzza and I'll be moderating today. I'm really excited to hear Jessica speak, as I imagine all of you are too. But first, I just want to say a few words about this forum that we're in here together. So, like we said, this is the Trust Psyche live stream, which happens on the first Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will have rotating speakers on a variety of topics that fall within the Trust Psyche vision. If you'd like to interact and ask questions live through Zoom, you can sign up each month at trustpsyche.com/livestream. You can also subscribe to the Trust Psyche YouTube channel, push the bell for alerts. Feel free to like our Trust Psyche page and join our Facebook group where we talk about all things astrology, psychology, and transpersonal. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Listen to stream the Trust Psyche Astrology and Psychology podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and Podbean. Folks, there are plenty of ways to connect with us in this day and age. Trust Psyche is dedicated to the wisdom teachings and embodied practice of astrology, psychology, the transpersonal movement, and their encompassing worldview. We celebrate a spiritual practice and lifestyle that provides nourishment and resilience to soul, body, and all our relations during these times of social and planetary transformation. Join us for our next live stream next month on June 2nd, entitled Transformations of Time, given by yours truly, Travis DiRuzza. And this will be the culmination of the month of May's archetypal theme, which is the nature of time. The stream podcast this month will also treat this theme, as well as Facebook posts throughout the month. So join us in the Facebook group to discuss. Every month we'll be doing a different theme with a different live stream host. So today, Jessica will speak for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then in the second half, we'll have Q&A. Those of you who are here live on Zoom can use the raise hand feature, which I'll explain when the time comes. And those of you on YouTube and Facebook can type in your questions at any time, and myself and Holly Shabtai from the Trust Psyche team will pass those questions on to Jessica. From what I've experienced in Jessica's teaching, she really shines most by being engaged with all of you. She loves your questions. They stimulate her, they activate her, they open her up. She's really an engaged relational teacher, so she would love to hear from you. So when the time comes, please don't hold back. I first met Jessica at CIS, where she completed her bachelor's degree. But by the time I arrived, she had gone on to Pacifica Graduate Institute, where she earned her master's degree in counseling psychology. A licensed psychotherapist, an astrologer with over a decade of experience, a teacher of life, and a badass on the dance floor, she was a woman of many talents. When it's time to be irreverent, she makes us all crack up, and when it's time to be serious, she empowers us in our suffering. I have the honor of laughing and crying with her, the honor of being her husband. Let us welcome Jessica DiRuzza.
Assalamu alaikum. Happy Ramadan on this new moon in Taurus. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I'm a proud first-generation American on my father's side. My dad is from Lebanon, and today he, Isaac, and his wife Rasha, and my brothers and sisters Tariq, Raneem, and Ziad are beginning their first day of Ramadan, and so I stand with them in devotion. Half of my family are first and second generation Mexican Americans, and in no way do I support the building of a wall or the banning of any people from this country because of where they're from. I believe it is immoral, unjust, and delusional. I'd like us all to take a moment to breathe together and center ourselves to ground and receive what wants to come through today. We're entering into Saturn-Pluto territory, which oftentimes tends to be pretty deep and intense, going into shadow material. We must remember that astrology is a powerful tool that amplifies our consciousness and activates our process. So we want to treat it as such. So let's take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. Grounding and centering again. One more time. I want you to keep breathing, cycling the air through you, and continue to ground. As I read this by Khalil Gibran, the great Lebanese American poet who was a Christian but deeply raised in Sufi mysticism, born with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and a Capricorn a day before myself, on pain. Grounding and centering, grounding and centering. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart and wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you've always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. Therefore, for his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen, and the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. World transits are the collective archetypal energies of our time. They are the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, the anima mundi, the soul of the world. We map the world transits by looking at where the planets are in the sky at any given moment in time. And that's what we'll be doing together here today. For those of you that are interested, the orbs of influence that I use for world transits comes from the work of Richard Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche, with over 30 years of research as a cultural historian, mapping cultural events and the evolution of consciousness through the movement of the outer planets. So I use a 15-degree orb for conjunctions and oppositions, and a 10-degree orb for the squares, and that's for world transits. As Travis said, I did my undergrad at CIIS, and I studied there with Rick, and eventually became a teaching assistant, and then developed my own astrology and psychology courses. At that time, I wanted to be the best astrologer that I could be, and so as Rick often says, it's important to get some kind of counseling training in order to hold therapeutic space, because again, astrology is a psychoactive process that amplifies our consciousness and naturally brings up all of our material when we open to it. It's a powerful medicine. And so I went on to Pacifica Graduate Institute and got my master's in depth psychology. And now I have a full-time private practice where I weave in the astrology and then I teach on astrology and psychology. I want to welcome all of my current and former students, all the students from Matthew Stelzner's Tarot and Flow class. I also want to welcome my clients and my colleagues, and then all of you who are new here to me and the Trust Psyche community. It is an honor to spend Sunday with you. So I'm going to speak for about half of our time, and then I'm going to open the floor and invite you in to ask your questions and to share. We're going to begin with our first image of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which began in January of 2018 and goes through December of 2021. It is in the sign of Capricorn. Saturn and Pluto will be exact within 1 degree by the end of this year, December 2019 and January of 2020. So it's within 3 degrees right now. It's really tight for all of 2019 and all of 2020. And then the archetypal waveform will be passing out in 2021. Saturn-Pluto is in a conjunction, meaning that it's at the new moon phase of its cycle of time. This particular cycle of time happens every 34 to 37 years, with the last conjunction happening from 1981 to 84 in the sign of Libra. Just as it is the new moon in Taurus today, where the sun and the moon are in a conjunction, the same place in the sky, that cycle of time between the relationship of the sun and the moon happens once a month, every 29 days. Every 2 planets in our solar system have their own cycle of time with its own duration. This particular cycle of time is 34 to 37 years. It's part of the rhythmic cycle of the clock of the universe. And I want us to keep that in mind, that there is a creative intelligence behind why the sun and the moon happen once a month versus why Saturn and Pluto and the archetypal themes that go with it, which we're going to be exploring in depth together today, happen every 34 to 37 years. Next, we'll see, for those of you that are interested, the 3 times that Saturn and Pluto were conjunct in the 20th century. So 1913 to 1916, 1946 to 1948, 1981 to 84, and now 2018 to 2021. We must understand our moment in time and our moment in history in order to really understand the importance and the relevance of this current Saturn-Pluto alignment that we're in right now. We have to understand the world transits that have come before this moment so we can see the teleological unfolding of the anima mundi, or the soul of the world, in her own evolutionary process, as each of us are individuals of the collective soul, or the collective species mind of this earth. So, as many of you know, we're at the end of the Uranus square Pluto, which began in 2007, 2008. We have 2 years left. It goes until 2020. And this represents the waxing square, the 90-degree angle, that Dane Rudhyar, the great 20th century astrologer, called the crisis in action, or what Matthew Stelzner, also a fantastic astrologer, says is the crossroads of manifestation. The last time these 2 planets were in their new moon phase was 1960 to 72. So Rudhyar describes, and as many of us are aware, that the new moon phase is the time of seeding, deeply seeding the image that is about to unfold, the symbolic archetypal image in its multivalence and multidimensionality and its myriad of forms, of the ways that it can come through in its expression, is deeply seated. And so there's a clearing out of the old and a coming in of the new, and a new cycle begins. So we're in the next phase of this cycle right now, which is more about taking action, building the structures and systems in our life from everything that we learned in the 1960s. Just like now, since 2007, the 1960s were a before and after moment. I want you to take a second and try and remember what your personal life was like before 2007. What was your personal life like a decade ago? And what was the collective like a decade ago? It's been an intense decade for all of us. I know, because I meet with all people from all walks of life every week, and it has been intense, unprecedented. We're in a time period of collective awakening, what many are referring to as the Kali Yuga, the great upheaval and change and transformation of unprecedented breakthroughs and breakdowns on every level of being. Ecological destruction and the call to protect and wake up to what we're doing to this planet and one another. The return of the repressed and the massive quickening of the emancipation of power and the radical evolution that's taking place through our awakening of patriarchy, of white supremacy and colonialism and capitalism that is destroying this planet. We have new waves of feminism. We're seeing mass migration, the unleashing of power and that what is hidden in the dark, deep, deep, deep down in our unconscious, of racism and sexism and corporations destroying the planet, not paying their taxes, the 1% and the elite having everything, the have and the have-nots. The dark history of America based on genocide and the killing of Native Americans and the kidnapping and enslavement of Africans. We see civil rights and women's rights. We see gay rights, LGBTQ, We see marriage equality coming in more and more, the legalization of pot, the use of psychedelics or entheogens in our healing process, the powerful, massive revolution and the collective drive to change, to bring forth a new world, and a drive for innovation on every level. The revolt against oppression, the massive world protests. I mean, Google protests of the last decade, and every single country is lit with protests, widespread social and political change. Kundalini awakening of massive, massive creativity, sexual freedom, the liberation of the Dionysian and the chthonic, the coming out of the hidden, and the powerful acceleration and radical and electric transfiguration of ourselves, of who we are, and what it means to be human. We have, of course, incredible technological breakthroughs relating to Uranus and that rapid acceleration of how quick everything happens with Uranus. We now have the smartphone. The last decade, we got the smartphone, which now means that we can carry the internet in our pocket, and it globally connects us to everyone, everywhere around the world that has access to the internet, which is increasing more and more every single day. And that those phones have HD cameras and microphones on them, which means that we can stream what's happening here with our family to our family across the world, or take beautiful photos of nature, or film police brutality. And we can post it on social media like Facebook and Twitter, and we revolutionize the way that we share news. Uranus is about revolution and the democratization of the creative fire of consciousness, and we are creative beings. We can share information and organize protests in an instant. This radically reforms mainstream media and the conglomerates that own it. We're taking the sharing of information and news back into our own hands. We have Kickstarter fundraising campaigns that allow us to self-publish books and films and music, things we wouldn't have been able to do before. We have 3D TVs and augmented reality. We have 3D printers that print human organs. We found cures for certain cancers and diseases that we thought we never would. We have supercomputers and human-like robots. The space race has continued since the landing of the moon in the 1960s. We've landed on Mars and we've discovered, what do you know? There's water. Of course, here in America, we have our first Black president. Women and people of color are in office more than ever. Ecologically, global warming and climate change and mass extinction are part of the common tongue more and more every single day. Even though we've known about it since the 1950s, there's not a single person on this planet now that hasn't heard of it. That is incredible. And we have more solar panels and wind energy used than ever before. Developments by youth who are so creative and brilliant, coming in, helping create systems to clean up the plastic from the oceans, sustainable farming and food, and cleaning up our waters. And the technologies, more than ever, are coming from women and from youth. So that's where we've been, and we're still there. But now there's something that's changing. Saturn and Pluto have made a conjunction in Capricorn, and that's what we're going to be focusing on now. Saturn is the archetypal principle of time, the physical world, form, consensus reality, structures and systems, institutions, the government, laws, policies, rules, tradition, the past. It's also our consequences, it's karma, it's fate, it's maturation and wisdom. In its feminine form, it's incarnation and manifestation, the setting of boundaries, discipline and devotion, commitment, the old and aging and death, the ending of things and the bottom line. It's finality and necessity. It also relates to the superego, judgment and criticism, negation and limit, Obstacles, problems, pain, loss, suffering, oppression, resistance to change, contraction, a weighty and heaviness, hard work, labor, and for those of you familiar with Stanislav Grof's perinatal matrices or the stages of birth, it is BPM 2. Or the first chakra, the rooted part of ourself that is concerned with our needs of survival, of food, shelter, and safety. Pluto is the archetypal principle of transformation, the driving force of evolution through the death-rebirth process of destruction and creation. It is the energy of Kali, Shiva, Shakti, the Kundalini energy, the serpent rising. It's nature and the wild. It's our primal, animalistic, instinctual drive to procreate. It's sex, death, and birth, and biology, and everything scatological. It is primordial and elemental. It is deep. It is the lava core of this earth and the volcanoes that erupt and the massive storms that come through. It's dramatic and overwhelming and often larger than life, out of our control. It also relates to the taboo and the dark, the unconscious, the underworld, that which is hidden and repressed, relating to our shame, the will to power, resources, and it relates to the id, the third stage of birth, and sometimes aspects of the second chakra. So Saturn, Pluto, and the sky is all in relationship to our own birth charts, the unique archetypal configurations that you were born with. And that tells us specifically through your personal transits how you are relating in your own individual way to this Saturn-Pluto combination or cycle of time. And of course, an astrologer can help you figure that out if you don't know how to calculate that yourself. But we are going to just be focusing on how it's showing up for everyone on a collective level, and then the ways that we individually are going to be experiencing it. Saturn, Pluto is in Capricorn, the 10th sign of the zodiac. It is an earth sign. It's a cardinal sign, and its motto is, we feel. Capricorn is all about the physical world. It's also ruled by Saturn, so there's a lot of overlap here between Saturn and Capricorn. It's a lot of extra Saturn energy right now. It's about the physical world. Capricorn is extremely industrious, very ambitious, efficient, organized, practical, pragmatic. It's very much concerned with taking things in a step-by-step manner. It's very patient, methodical, and it's oriented towards success in achieving one's goals. The sea goat climbing up the mountain slowly, patiently, one foot in front of the other, knowing that when you play the long game, when you don't cut corners, when you plan ahead, when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, you're building the foundation brick by brick, and it is solid and it's secure and it withstands the test of time. Of course, we know that this also has to do with social status and networking, and Capricorn can be very stubborn and unforgiving when others are not as diligent or ambitious as one would like. The last conjunction was in Libra, 1981 to 84, and that had a lot more to do with things of relationship, where Libra has to do with balance and fairness and justice, harmony, social relations, that's specifically focusing on the other, so it rules partnership. But both are cardinal signs, so it's about getting shit done, taking action. Some phrases of Saturn, Pluto that we can think of. Enforcing the golden rule. You reap what you sow. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in Mosaic law, whatever is hurtful to you, do not do to any other person. And sins come home to roost. Or, as the dark golden rule from Jafar and Aladdin would say, he who has the gold makes the rules. Or as Uncle Ben in Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. And lastly, as J.R.R. Tolkien in Lord of the Rings says, who's born with Saturn trine Pluto, I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." Humanity is at a karmic crossroads. We all feel it. We all know it. Every day, we are confronted with death. We are confronted with the destruction and the irreversible destruction and pain that we are causing one another and Mother Earth and all of her species in the plant and animal worlds. It's a time of the great reckoning. And by that I mean the settling of accounts, bringing the balance back to zero, making amends and reparations for the wrongdoings of our past. Saturn-Pluto relates to deep time, to our deep past, our deep history, and the consequences of the past. There's no hiding from our past or our history anymore. And the consequences from our individual and collective past actions, behaviors, decisions. During Saturn-Pluto times, the consequences, Saturn, of our actions are felt with more power, Pluto. There's a greater effect, there's a greater impact during Saturn-Pluto time periods. People who are born with this energy can tell you they walk a very, very, very narrow line through life. There is not much room for fault or mistake there, because Saturn of consensus reality in the material world and form, karma and fate, meets them with a titanic intensity almost immediately. Now, that's a lot to bear. It's pretty heavy, it's pretty intense, and it can feel constricted, it can feel limited, it can feel oppressive, right? The ironclad grip, the immense amount of physical and psychological and emotional pressure that these people live with, or that we experience during the collective times, like now. However, the medicine of that is it's actually an extremely efficient process, right? Capricorn and Saturn love efficiency. That is awesome. You know, you get smacked with some pain. That's gonna force you to take a look at your shit a lot sooner than you would if that pain wasn't there. When you hit that limitation, when you hit that wall, you're gonna wake up. You're gonna have to face it. You're gonna have to face the problems that are there. Because what Saturn-Pluto knows is that when we don't do that, when we don't face those Saturnian problems, it gets deeper and more intense and more overwhelming and more constrictive. And so how do we work with that? How do we let those forces of constriction and contraction and fear sculpt us, refine us, mature us, ground us? These are all the things that Saturn wants and that Pluto brings with its intensity, its drama. Saturn is karma and consequence, and Pluto wants to evolve whatever it touches. So I believe that we need to evolve our understanding of karma. We need to bring a feminist revisioning of karma. And by that, I mean there's two types of karma. There's temporal karma, which most of us are familiar with, right? Temporal karma is linear karma that comes from the individual. And the understanding of it is that as the individual makes choices, as you make choices in your life, there is a sequential cause and effect of a chain of events that leads to a certain future, a certain fate. And that can come from yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, the last lifetime, 10 lifetimes ago, right? It's a linear cause and effect unfolding of individual karma. That's a much more privatized understanding of karma. And it's also the understanding of karma on the path towards individual enlightenment. But what about collective karma, right? Spatial karma. Karma that has to do with the fields of karma that we incarnate into that have nothing to do with our personal self and personal story, that they're actually situated in the moments of history. For example, being a woman right now in a patriarchal world that has oppressed women for thousands of years. Right? When I incarnate as Jessica into this body and into this life, I inherit the collective field of this historical moment of karma of being a woman. That has nothing to do with my soul. Now, I believe that my soul chose that as part of the character and the role that I'm here to play. But we all are embedded in fields of spatial karma, collective fields of spatial karma that we inherit. And I want us to begin to expand our notion of karma to hold the temporal and the spatial together. And I'm just going to bring in here my good teacher and friend, Chris Beisch, who wrote Dark Night, Early Dawn. If you have not read it yet, it is a must read. And in here, there's a chapter that's called Beyond Personal Karma. And I love what Chris says, and so I just want to bring this in here for a moment. The karmic challenges we face and the blessings we inherit can be described within both the temporal and spatial frames of reference, for these two perspectives are complementary. If described within the temporal frame of reference, the story of karma is one in which the individual inherits and advances the derivatives of choices made in his or her previous lifetimes. If described within the spatial frame of reference, however, the story becomes the story of the individual inheriting and advancing the derivatives of his or her species' previous choices. Viewed from this perspective, the individual appears to be a distillation of collective karmic currents. This is not an either-or choice, for both these perspectives are true. The collective norms of the group become the karmic context of our individual decision-making. The species mind is the matrix within which our individualized agendas unfold. As karmic cause and effect crystallizes in our lives, therefore, it can be seen as being both individual and collective, as simultaneously reflecting both the temporal and spatial dimensions of mind. Similarly, our responses to our karmic challenges, and this is what Saturn-Pluto is all about, generates an energy which flows into both vectors, echoing through time and space, affecting both our individual future and the future of our species. Love that. Thanks, Chris. We're all becoming more aware of this psychological phenomenon called intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational is another word for deep, which is another word for Pluto, right? Our ancestral inheritance, that's Pluto. Trauma is one aspect of Saturn. So intergenerational trauma is a Saturn-Pluto phenomenon. And we can see this in the individual life where, for example, something like neglect or alcoholism, which is a form of neglect, or incest, an abuse of power, sexually violating somebody. These things are all examples of intergenerational trauma patterns that are passed down from one generation to the next until they're cleared, until they're healed. Now, how many lifetimes, how many generations back does one have to go before they see the intergenerational trauma not happening? Well, that's a temporal understanding, a more linear way of passing down from one generation to the next intergenerational trauma. It's a little bit seemingly more local to the family system that you're a part of. However, what about collective intergenerational trauma with things like genocide of the Native Americans or of the Jews or of Africans? The number one question I get asked as a therapist when I'm in session is oftentimes something along the lines of, why is this happening to me? Why am I suffering like this? And I want to say it's a natural outcome of the experiences that you've had. When you are neglected as a child, a natural outcome of that is that you're going to experience anxiety and depression and potentially low self-esteem. Like, that is a natural outcome of not getting the love and attention that you deserved and needed to survive emotionally and psychologically as a child. Now, the same is true for people who did receive that, people who were loved as children and grew up in a safe home. And we see them and they, oftentimes come across as being very centered and grounded and safe. That's not because they're a good person and the other person's a bad one. It's a natural outcome of the cause and effect of receiving that type of proper care. Well, the same is true for the collective karma that we carry. It's a natural outcome as a woman living in this world that I have to work through a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety to show up in this space in my body as a fully present, passionate, enlivened, sexual, creative being. Like, that takes a lot for me to do that every time. Not because Jessica DiRuzza has these, personal problems in my history where I did this or I did that or da-da-da-da-da. No, like, that is the collective shared experience of women right now. And each one of you has your own version of that. And so it turns out that karma is actually not anywhere near as personal as I think many of us have been kind of indoctrinated to believe from a more individualistic secular society. It's a natural holdover from being brought up in this world. So just as much as we have intergenerational trauma, we also have intergenerational wisdom, which is another side of the Saturn-Pluto, because Saturn is wisdom, Sophia. And so all of the beautiful gifts and virtues that we have when we dance and we sing and we tell stories and we create and we heal, right? All those medicines that you carry in your soul that come from your ancestors, right? That intergenerational wisdom that you can call upon in any moment and ask for help and guidance. It's in your DNA as much as the trauma, right? Two different sides of Saturn, trauma and wisdom. Well, when we start to bring out more of this collective spatial understanding of karma, it naturally brings us into another aspect of Saturn-Pluto, which is deep ecology. Saturn-Pluto can both be the death and destruction of nature, Pluto, as it can be the protection, Saturn, of nature. And so with deep ecology, we can get this commitment and protection to the wild, to nature. And I just love what Elizabeth Allison, who's in the Ecology, Spirituality, and Religion department at CIIS, just published a really awesome, really short article on race, trauma, and climate change from a magazine called Reflections from Yale University. I think it's so awesome, and it perfectly fits with what we're talking about here with deep ecology and intergenerational trauma and wisdom of Saturn-Pluto, which is this. She says, I suggest that the persistence of unaddressed historical trauma has prevented us from addressing climate change as creatively and forcefully as the crisis demands. She goes on to say that such a reckoning of the Saturn-Pluto conducted alongside critical technological and policy innovations to reduce carbon emissions would help work through some of the anger and shame that keeps so many locked away in isolated individualism. Recognizing and confronting the legacies of pain and shame would free up the energy to address the climate crisis directly and fearlessly, Saturn-Pluto, and connect ecological devastation to the original deficit of empathy. Greater recognition of the knowledge traditions of indigenous and African societies could provide new insights about living with respect to the natural world. So all of that was just shared is Saturn-Pluto. Saturn is our defense mechanisms. It's the way that we cleverly and very intelligently cope with life. We all have them. It's part of the human psyche. However, coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms take a huge amount of plutonic libidinal psychic energy to maintain. And so the energy, the plutonic vital life force energy that goes into defending and protecting those coping mechanisms of denial, it lessens our plutonic creative drive, second chakra energy, to deal with the present moment, which we are fully capable of doing. I have absolutely zero doubt that the divine that is in us, and we are it, is here in this moment without being able to handle what is happening. But the requirement is that we deal with the past. And until we do that, individually and collectively, we're going to just keep being in the destructive patterns of Pluto instead of the creative, life-enhancing, life-creating sides of Pluto. That's how it works. That's the key with Pluto. So of course, when that coping mechanisms are in place and there's that suppression of being able to actually transform what's happening, we have things like depression and anxiety and denial, and then psychological splitting, which is a part of Saturn-Pluto. Black and white thinking, us versus them, good versus evil, which leads to things like scapegoating, blaming, evacuating our shame, and causing more hurt and more pain. So when we don't deal with our shit, the natural human thing to do is to pass on the pain that we've inherited. Well, our ancestors, what we've inherited are both the oppressors and the victims. And that unresolved trauma that is carried in the spatial collective field of humanity's species, ego, mind, and soul right now is a part of each of us. And so Saturn-Pluto says that is the truth, that is the reality, that's the bottom line. And what is up to us in our agency is how we morally and ethically face the karmic crossroads of choosing to break those deep patterns and cycles of time and choose to go in a healing direction or choose to go into further denial. Saturn-Pluto shows us our blind spots. That's its medicine. It shows us our mistakes. It shows us where we've lacked integrity, out of fear, out of shame, out of guilt. It shows us how we've been manipulative and coercive, and we've had the misuse or abuse of power. All Pluto. It shows us where we've been in power struggles with authority figures, or we've been in power struggles with our own inner sense of authority, Saturn. And of course, this misuse or abuse of power and authority can show up in a tyrannical way, in a righteous way, again with blaming and scapegoating and othering, which is a potentially very big expression of the Saturn-Pluto. But Saturn-Pluto also is about working with our pain and our shame. Saturn is the work that we do. It's the work that we do here in the world. Not just our careers and our vocation, but the actual karmic work of metabolizing and digesting our own pain and suffering that is there, intimately interwoven and connected with the collective. Because Saturn relates to negation and separation, oftentimes when we're in our plutonic shame of that which is hidden and repressed and dark in ourselves, this can lead to extreme disconnection. Pluto makes extreme whatever it touches, and Saturn can be disconnection, separation. And so there can be periods of extreme loneliness that happens during Saturn-Pluto, of alienating separation, intolerable isolation, and profound shame, which is extremely difficult because, as we know, we're hardwired for connection and love. Neurologically, it's in our DNA. We're social creatures. Essentially, we're fucked when we're disconnected from ourselves and other people, and we end up being in a trauma state of consciousness, which usually activates our primal plutonic fears of Saturn. And that fear-based consciousness leads to all kinds of things like scarcity consciousness, that there's not enough love, attention, and resources to go around. It can show up as being as cold as ice. It can show up as building walls and some idea that we somehow are better than other people. Pluto can intensify and deepen whatever it touches, and so it can intensify and deepen our pain and suffering of Saturn, and that can activate our fight, flight, and freeze responses, right? And we're in a traumatic response that kind of has symptoms of PTSD that's unresolved. And when we're in that place, not only are we less able to function in our lives and show up for our most important relationships with our family and friends, but we're also more capable of hurting one another. That's just human nature. And as I said before, until we face our problems, they're just going to deepen. And so what Saturn wants is for us to take responsibility. And this is what Capricorn wants too. It wants us to take responsibility for our power, the ways that we can influence the world around us. And it wants us to take responsibility for the fact that we can be extremely empowered when we do our work in the world. And that when we do that and we show up with moral integrity and honesty, we stand erect with a strong spine, and we're able to channel immense powers of healing, of evolution, of change, real change. I'm talking real change. Right now in my practice, I see so much courage and strength in my clients, showing up every day to face their pain and their suffering with such honesty. And you know what I'm seeing is the benefits of doing that during Saturn-Pluto and doing it while it's in Capricorn. It's efficient. You want to metabolize some shit? Now's the time, man. Fucking just burning through it. I'm so impressed. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Saturn-Pluto is the vehicle to transform the structures and systems in our life. Work, family, relationships, the ecological world, all of it. And when we focus our primal energy, our creative life force, whatever we focus it on right now, we're gonna build that step by step. That's what Saturn-Pluto does. It plays the long game. It's all about endurance. And this is what Capricorn's about. We know we're going to achieve the goal if we do it honestly, if we don't cut corners. But if we're being dishonest and we're out of integrity, that shit is gonna collapse. And there's gonna be an immense amount of pressure to the system. Pluto creates pressure. And Saturn is the system. It's the container. All the containers that hold us. And when that container is strong, when it's solid, when it's been built with a strong foundation and a strong infrastructure, it can hold immense amounts of energy that come in and transform and evolve and take us to the next level. But when we're lying to ourselves, and we all do it, and when we're deceiving ourselves about our truth and what we know we actually need to be in alignment with our path, it gets worse. And the systems collapse and they break down and they fall apart, as they should, right? Kali is terrifying to the ego because she comes in and she strips down and cleanses and purifies that which has been outgrown, isn't serving, is outdated. But to the three-eyed raven or the higher self, she is welcomed. And you bow down and you let her dance all over you. Because as Rumi said, when have you ever been made less by dying? But it's so terrifying, isn't it? It's so fucking scary to show up in that raw, courageous way, to let go of the bullshit. I know, I'm human too. It's hard for me too. And we all deserve people cheering us on and rooting us on and getting the support that we need to go through that very intense, deep, and profound process. And the time is now. That's what it's about. The integrity of the structures and systems of our lives. And when they're sound, we can achieve the greatest things. Saturn-Pluto is about the hard work and the hard labor that it takes to create magnificent, sustainable, enduring, long-lasting structures and systems of power that are fair and just and moral and include everybody as deserving of having a good life and to be safe. And anywhere we fall short of that, in our personal lives, with our family, with our coworkers, with our children, that shit is gonna erupt. That's what Pluto does. It's the volcano that erupts. It's the tectonic shifts that move until we get so destabilized that we fall down, and then what do? We do the other side of Pluto. We rebuild, we restore, we make something greater than before that's more honest and more real. Saturn-Pluto is ambitious and determined. We can accomplish so much efficiently with this energy through blood, sweat, and tears, through honesty and truth. It's the vehicle to growth and evolution. With a focused energy, it grows stronger. I'm seeing people left and right with things that they have been working on for years or decades bring out into the world with such strength and conviction and power. And it's incredible, the success that they're having. And then I equally see people who say, you know what, my job is fucking bullshit and it's got nothing to do with me or making this world a better place, and so I'm starting over. And I'm talking about people in their 40s and 50s and 60s who are starting over and going back to school or actually doing the thing they know they could always do with limited resources. That's another aspect of Saturn-Pluto. Our resources can be limited. Money can be tight, right? But like, they're doing it. They're making the sacrifices necessary to be in their own moral integrity. And they're starting over. And you know what I see? I see the universe coming in and giving those people support. And it doesn't mean it's not fucking hard and scary. But I see them rebuilding and restoring the structural integrity of their life. And as Capricorn tells us again and again, this is a slow process. It's paced. And success comes with time. That's the deal. I'll mention a couple more things and then we'll open the floor. Saturn-Pluto can create extreme pressures. I mentioned this a little before. I want to acknowledge the extreme pressures that you might be feeling in your life. Whether that's the physical pressure of your back, of your joints, of your spine, whether that's issues with your teeth. These are all Saturn or Capricorn themes, right? It rules the skeletal system, our bones. I want to honor the other physical pressures that might be in your life with physical discomfort or pain. I want to honor the psychological pressures that a lot of us are in right now, to wake up each day and do our best in the face of so much tragedy and horror. It takes a lot to be here right now and be human and be alive. So much strength and courage. And people are suffering and in pain. And there's a lot of psychological and emotional pressure right now that many of us are going through. And if you're not going through it, I know the people around you are going through it. Now, the id of the psyche can intensify the superego with Saturn-Pluto, and it can bring a sense of heaviness and harsh criticism and judgment that sometimes can be very punitive and shame-inducing, especially when it comes to our pain. It can be paralyzing and create a sense of immobility where we just feel really fucking stuck. And we get a loss of perspective and our consciousness narrows and we lose sight. And that's where more of that black and white thinking and disconnection comes in and that disengagement. And what I want to say to that is that is normal, that is natural. Most of us are going through that right now. I'm going through that right now. But the antidote to shame and the antidote to Saturn-Pluto, and this is why Brene Brown, who's born with the Saturn-Pluto opposition, I'm so grateful to her and her work around shame and vulnerability, is because what does she say? It's our ability to reach out and ask for help. It's our ability to tell our story, to stand inside of our story and tell it with honesty and the courage that it takes to do that. That frees us from that alienation and that separation. And it's the hardest thing that we do. And it's a choice that we each make. And it is a choice of whether or not we live courageously and wholeheartedly, which means we take risks, we live in the uncertain, And that means we fail. And if anything knows about failure, it's Saturn-Pluto. Deep failure. You are not going to get out there in this life and not fucking fail. If you are living from an authentic place, that is the nature of the game. We're going to fail sometimes, and it hurts a lot. But what hurts more? Ending up on your deathbed, looking back, going, oh fuck, what just happened? Fuck that one up. Because why? Because I was scared I was gonna die? We're all gonna die. Now, that's easier said than done, right? And so what do we deserve as social creatures who need love and connection? We deserve to do that with somebody who can support us, whether that's a therapist or a coach or a family member, right? Oftentimes, the more intense or severe the trauma, the more we need someone who's professionally trained in that place to show up as a loving witness and support. We all deserve that. And we can all have that if we choose to live in that courageous way and of healing our own temporal and spatial karma that we've inherited in service of the transformation of what it means to be human right now on Earth. We can be deeply empowered in and through our work right now. And I'll say two last things. Our species is undergoing a sexual maturation. Pluto is our sexuality. Saturn wants to mature whatever it touches. As long as we live in a rape culture and a violent culture that oppresses women and minorities and people of color and the LGBTQ community, we're not going to be okay. We're just not. We are in our transparency with ourselves and with our history and the truth of the culture and civilization that we're in right now. We have the opportunity to mature, to grow up. And we have an opportunity to mature our plutonic instincts, our primal libido, and our drives. We have an opportunity to practice learning how to channel them and contain them in ways that are safe and fulfilling, that are ethical and of service. I'm all about owning our sexuality and having a really awesome sexual life. It's so important for most of us to have that for our well-being. But we also need to be honest about the ways that we may have shown up sexually or have received different sexual experiences that were harmful. And that's a scary thing to do, right? It's very shame-inducing. But it is a requirement of us to grow up as a species. And lastly, Saturn-Pluto can have a lot to do with the intensity of our boundaries. And I want to say this at a time when we're asking questions about unifying and separating. Boundaries are really important for living a healthy, safe, and compassionate existence. You know, you can't have true compassion without boundaries. But my question is, who gets to draw those boundaries? And what are they drawing them in service of? Because if boundaries are being drawn to build a bullshit wall, to keep the people out of this country, which won't even work, who this country literally cannot function without, because they're the ones who run the restaurants, they're the ones who cook the food, clean the dishes, grow the food, take care of our children. We want to love everything about Mexico. We want to love Cinco de Mayo and have a margarita and eat tacos or go to the Yucatan, celebrate Dia de los Muertos. But we don't want to honor these human beings as the human beings they are. That's fucking bullshit. Or we could use that same Saturn-Pluto energy to draw boundaries around a fascist president and do what is morally right. When we stand in our empathy, which means we occupy the shoes of all those around us, especially when we have privilege, power and control, as I do as a white person in this country, and as many of you do who are watching. This world is not socially just until we are completely content with reincarnating into any place in this world as any type of human. And I'll tell you what, I am fucking scared to incarnate into most of this world right now. So we got a long ways to go. And you know what? I know we can do it. I know we can do it because that's who we are and that's what we're made of. As creative agents here right now, we can show up with Pluto as destructive, or we can show up with it as making the right decisions and actually changing this shit for good, because we need it to survive. We see the Saturn-Pluto people working in the depths of Psyche and the capacity to hold great pain. Carl Jung, Stanislav Grof, Gabor Mate, Liz Green, Brene Brown, Greta Thunberg, these are all amazing Saturn-Pluto people that we can look to in their professional work, in their personal lives, and to soak in the wisdom of the things that they've labored into existence from their own wisdom and their own pain and suffering of how to show up in a morally and ethical way. And so let's end here with Brene Brown, born with the Saturn-Pluto opposition. I want to be in the arena. I want to be brave with my life. And when we make the choice to dare greatly, we sign up to get our asses kicked. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both, not at the same time. Thank you so much for going on that journey with me, and now I'm excited to open up the floor and to hear from all of you who are here. You can ask your questions live if you are on Zoom, and if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can type them in to Travis and Holly, who are helping moderate. I ask that when you ask your question or you do your share, that you center yourself as much as possible first. That you ask it or share in a minute or less, because there's a lot of people here, and so I just want us to be aware and mindful that there are a lot of people right now who may also want to share or ask a question. I can feel right now in my body that that was a pretty intense exploration of Saturn-Pluto. It is its nature. When we invoke that cycle of time or that archetypal complex, what you might be feeling in your body right now, or the emotions or sensations or possible memories that have been unearthed for you, is completely normal. And I want you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, to take some deep cleansing breaths, to stretch, to get some water, to step outside, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself right now. So please, I'm ready to open the floor, Travis.
All right, let's hear from Rachel. Rachel, go ahead, you're unmuted.
Thank you for a wonderful dive into how it actually feels. And I wanted to ask you about the retrogrades that are going to happen now and how that, and what that might relate to in time, like where is it connecting to?
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel. So good to see you. So Rachel's asking about the stationary retrogrades that have just happened with Pluto and Saturn, meaning that those two planets have, from the position of Earth, appeared to have stopped and now are slowly moving backwards. All planets except the Sun and the Moon do this. And I think that I like to situate myself within the cycle of the retrograde by doing this. For me, typically when the planets are moving forward, similar to when Mercury is forward versus retrograde, there's a profound quickening that takes place in our consciousness and in the events that are making up our lives, individually and collectively. And for me, when we can sit in a place of silence and tranquility, we can actually receive the archetypal or symbolic downloads of the themes that we are going to have to be personally and collectively working with during the rest of the cycle. So when the planet stations retrograde, there's an unraveling and an undoing of all of the things that we were told when it was moving forward that we knew we were going to have to deal with. Like, let's say, for example, you know that you're looking for a new job. Well, when the planets are moving forward, you're going to get a lot of information about what types of jobs you might be getting, what types of jobs you might be wanting, the way your job's not working, and you can begin to really align yourself with those principles. When the planets station retrograde, there's an undoing of everything that keeps you from having the essentially the image or the notion of what it is that you're meant to be doing during this Saturn-Pluto cycle of time. So the retrograde serves in a medicinal way to undo, to unweave, to unhinge all the things that keep you from being able to move forward. So when they station direct here at the end of summer, there is going to be then a reweaving of the new truth of how you need to move forward, and there's going to be a quickening of consciousness again. But instead of receiving necessarily the downloads or the information of what you need to do, there's a typical sense of a real momentum of those events moving forward. And so we can ride that archetypal waveform of when the energies move forward and catch it and go and move forward with momentum. That often is easier for us to do than the unraveling of the retrograde, because that requires more uncertainty. Things can be a little bit more destabilized and less secure, because things are kind of coming apart. And now there's varying degrees of that. You know, I'm not trying to incite any amount of fear here, but it's just a natural kind of reviewing and revisioning and renewing of the truths that we know to be true, if we're being honest with ourselves. And so we want the undoing to happen. It's just like a new moon energy. If you don't clear out the old shit, then you can't plant the seeds for the new garden. That's what the retrograde serves. It helps us clear out. It helps us cleanse, and then we can move forward again. Thank you for that.
Let's hear from Rosalie. Rosalie, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Travis.
Hi there.
I'm sorry that I'm not showing here. You know, I'm not really good on Zoom, and I have some limitations on my computer, I guess. So anyway, I really loved the exploration and discussion that you touched on, the going through the darkness and this very slow process, and taking responsibility to look at your own shit, and that will take, you know, these years until 2022, 21, in order to, if we really take that responsibility, to be able to see the results of good work, of real work, right? So that it's so profound and helpful, because most of us don't want to go there. We just want to find solutions. And it's not about finding solutions. It's about to really be honest with ourselves and going through the shit. I really appreciate that. I just would like to register that. Thank you. It's very reassuring for all of us. And I loved your intensity, your passion, and your pain. I could see your pain. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really want to deeply affirm the slowness of the process. As a Capricorn, you know, I'm all about the slow-mo. I mean, I know I come across really fiery and fast, and in my speech I get excited and whoa, it's coming through, but Capricorn is all about taking it one step at a time. And when we do this work, it's like one step forward, two steps back, and that is the natural rhythm of Psyche. And I think a lot of times we can have self-judgment and even shame around the way we repeat patterns, or how long it's taking us to change, how slow we're moving. I mean, I get this all the time in my work with my clients. You know, I work with people for years at a time. But I'm going to tell you what, working at that duration of time, which is a complete honoring of Saturn, when we put in the time, when we put in the effort, Saturn rewards us. And when we're talking about real, core, fundamental change, it takes time. Michelle Obama said it beautifully in her book, Becoming, which I loved reading. And her and Barack both really spoke to, like, man, they know what's up about making real change, because they broke through so many barriers by being the first African American family in the White House, and holy shit, they faced some serious obstacles. And that's true for all of us. And the thing that she said the most was like, real change takes time. And as many wise people say, sometimes we don't see that in our lifetime. The efforts that we put in collectively or even personally, we don't see the results that we think we should see. And I think that, you know, at one time, sometimes it can feel kind of intimidating or limiting. But if we bring in a reincarnationist perspective and we recognize this is one life of thousands or millions, I think it shifts our reverence for the deep work process that I know so many of you are involved in. And by the grace of the divine, there are moments when that quickens and things are released. But yes, real, true change takes time, and it takes repetition. It's a practice, and they're habits that we create. I remember one time someone said to me, "Oh, you know, I just go and do ayahuasca once a year for 3 days, clear all my shit, and then I just live the rest of the year hanging back." And I'm like, damn, wow, you fucking figured out the 3-day purge, and the rest of the year it's okay. Wow, that's just not true. And anybody who says that's true, honestly, I think they're full of shit.
Let's hear from Maureen. Maureen, go ahead.
Hi, Jessica. Hi, Travis.
Hi there.
So good to see and hear you. It's so wonderful. When you were, it's just a comment. When you were like talking and everything, I was seeing this building being demolished, like a controlled demolition, and then like this sort of intentional rebuilding of something different. And I thought that was like, yes, if we could do that, if we could just make it so much more intentional than haphazardly going through all this stuff. But so I guess that's part of the question. Like, how do we have a more controlled visiting of this type of energy in our lives? Because it's so intense. And it makes you, because like last month was horrid for me. It was just like I was isolating, all this shame and everything. Although I feel like I've come out of it now, like you said, like when you do the work, it's quicker. But like, how do you do it in a more controlled way than it being kind of like a haphazard thing in your life?
Mm-hmm. Good to hear from you, Maureen. First of all, I just want to say that I think last month fucking sucked. I know it was really hard for me. I know it was really hard for a lot of people that I work with. Whew, it was just intense. I mean, I felt like everything was coming in really fast and all at once, and that's just difficult for our nervous systems to handle. I mean, that's just the truth of it. And so, I don't know, you know, it's a little complex, because I understand what you're saying. Like, when we can be more intentional about, let's say, for example, rebuilding, there is less of a feeling that it's coming from the outside, right? And that's happening to us, and that we're a victim of our circumstances. And that is a big part of Saturn-Pluto, is like taking ownership, right? That's the whole point of taking responsibility, the ability to respond, taking ownership of, you know, what's going on. And it's complex, because on the one hand, I want to say, you know, a lot of times if we're really honest with ourselves, I think we have like a pretty good sense of what we need to do. However, the nature of Pluto is that because it's our unconscious, it's a blind spot as well. And so I don't think it's necessarily always because like, you know, we're lying to ourselves or something. It's just because like we need help from the outside to see what's going on, to get that perspective and that feedback. So it's you know, it's always kind of a fine line there for me, but we're really, really good at deceiving ourselves. I mean, it's just it's an amazing coping strategy that we all have. And so what I find is, you know, if we're lying to ourselves about whatever it is, the biggest step we have to take in that process is to stop lying to ourselves. And in my experience, when we stop lying to ourselves about the marriage we're in, or about the job that we have, or, you know, about that friendship, or about our debt, whatever it might be, right? Our baggage, the things that hurt. The biggest step to take is to be honest with ourselves. And I'm not going to remember the Goethe quote, but it's essentially along the lines of, when you actually take responsibility and you go to take action to make change, reality conspires and it shows up to support you. And I remember one time I was taking a huge risk in my life. I was doing a controlled demolition, and it was messy and it didn't feel like I was in that much control, but I felt in control enough that I was making a decision to radically change my life. And it was a radical upheaval of my life. And I remember I was talking with Chris Beish, and he said, put it all on the line. Put it all on the line and the universe will rise up to meet you. And at that point, I just felt like I had nothing left to lose, that it was one of those moments in life that I think are pretty rare, where I was like, fuck it. I'm going to put it all on the line. I'm going to let it all go, and I'm going to see what happens. And by golly, I did. And life rose up. And it was a hard 2 years, but holy shit, am I so grateful. Am I so grateful. My life is infinitely better because of that very hard and courageous choice. And this is what Brene Brown's saying. You can have comfort or you can have courage, but you can't have both at the same time. And millions of people choose to live in the comfort. That's their choice. But for those of us who are choosing to live in the courage, I think the only part of the control that we have is being honest with ourselves and just taking responsibility for the things we can take responsibility for and move forward and get the support that we need to do that, because it's scary. It's really scary. So I'm not sure, how satisfying that answer was for you, but in part, control is an illusion, but on the other part, it's not. We are agents and we do have agency. And, the truth is, and Saturn knows this and Capricorn knows this, we all have responsibilities in our life. Most of us can't just be like, cut the cord, see ya, peace out. Like, that wouldn't be honest, right? I'm not saying that, if you're going to really be courageous, then you got to go all in and just say, fuck you and do it. No, we have responsibilities, right? And the mature thing to do is to be responsible for our responsibilities and to take in whatever potential limitations those pose in our life and to be honest and realistic about it. Let's be honest and realistic about the debt that we're in, or about the child support we have to pay, or about the ways our marriage isn't working, or the ways that maybe we need to stay in it, until the kids are out of the house. Whatever your version of that is, honesty is just seriously owning, your situation, to stand inside the truth of your story and own it, and not try to play these mind games to escape out of it. And I find that when we do that, and, Brene Brown says this too, when you own that, the story, the truth of the story, and the truth of the limitations, new things can come in that help you. So, those are some thoughts. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left here. We've got 2 hands. Let's see if we can get to both of them. Robin, let's hear from you first, and then we'll go to Bill.
You unmute? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Hi, Robin.
Well, this has been really great to be here, and I'm very moved by so much of what you said. I'll try to see if I narrow my question. I've been part of a community of people who work with dreams, and as been a tremendous process of learning and working with the energies of various things, like of what, like you're saying, sort of the stuff that's our shit that we don't want to look at, and being in a community with others. I guess and in that work, we often have, and a lot of the practitioners have been using the birth chart, the natal chart. So I just wondered if you could say a little bit about, because I've been doing this work a long time now, and there is this sense of that we're also very unique based on our relationship to all of these energies. And as they're changing and as we're going through this collective movement, do you have a sense of, especially work as many people as you work with, of how we let our story change as our relationship individually to the process maybe changes through our personal lifetimes?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what I find for myself is there are moments that I have these sort of moments of something that I can kind of hang on to and go, okay, here's now like a little mantra or a new belief or a new way of saying, you know, I've looked at this and I've worked with this, but it gets triggered again and it comes up again and it's always new, and it's a little bit relating to what you said about just always being in your truth, like you are where you are in any given moment. But with the astrology brought in there, I'm curious how that relates.
Thank you. Yeah. The journey of evolution, Pluto, is a process of repetition, Saturn. That's the nature of Psyche, that's the nature of astrology, right? We're looking at rhythms and cycles that repeat again and again. And I think a lot of times we can be kind of like, well, wait, why is this repeating? I've already dealt with this, or what's happening here? And the truth is, especially when it comes to things like our trauma, you know, our trauma never goes away. Like our trauma will always affect who we are. And this is what Chiron really helps us see, is those wounds that we have, they're there as a place for us to channel our light into the world. It's through the pain that we've gone through and choosing not to repeat it, to not do it to others, that healing can happen. And that can be from, you know, how you relate to your children, to, you know, how you show up in following your passions, like whatever yours is, your version of the wounded healer journey. It's like the light that heals gets in through the wound by making the karmic decision to not further the pain. And oftentimes that begins by us choosing not to further that pain inside of ourselves. A clear example of that is if we were abandoned in any way, physically, emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually as children, we are most likely going to abandon ourselves until we wake up to the pattern that that's what we're doing, which usually happens by choosing to be in relationships where the other person can't show up for us, and there's neglect involved, and then there's a lot of pain, or we've become the oppressor and we're hurting other people through violence of emotional, verbal abuse, physical abuse, whatever it is that we might be acting out the pain. And we wake up to that moment and go, shit, I've lost connection with my empathy. I'm abandoning myself. Okay, this is a choice point. And when we choose to make a different choice other than to abandon ourselves and to begin to let that light come through and heal, we are going to be faced with that decision again and again and again and again until the choice to abandon becomes so small that it's not really even a choice anymore. But it's still there and we can see it. It's just shrunk and it's gotten a lot smaller, and it happens less often for a less amount of time. But when we're under-resourced, which is definitely a Saturn-Pluto thing, when we're tired, when we're malnourished, when we're overworked, we're much more prone to collapsing And when we collapse, we usually go back into our complexes of our pain and our hurt and our disconnection, and we tell ourselves these stories about how we're not good enough and nobody likes us, or I'm never going to be good, da 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 da. That's a sign that you're under-resourced. That's a sign that you need help. That's a sign that you need to take more time for yourself, reach out and connect. When we do that, and we choose to do that more often than being under-resourced, which is what self-care is all about, we exponentially enhance our ability to heal and to make a different choice, and therefore the karmic crossroads changes in our life, and we walk a different path than our parents. We walk a different path than our ancestors. We walk a different path. It's the karmic crossroads. It's a choice, and that choice is a practice, and that's why it doesn't happen overnight. And so that choice to choose ourselves will show up in a billion different ways again and again, and we'll fuck it up and we'll fall over and be like, fuck, I fell for it again. Why did I do that? Oh wait, hey, I just realized I did that. Oh, cool. Okay, stop doing that. All right, I'm gonna stop doing that. I'm gonna get back on. So yeah, repetition is how we evolve. And it's the repetition of our patterns, and it's the repetition of making a different choice in our patterns is the spiralic journey of the soul.
Let's hear from Bill. Bill, go ahead.
Hi, Jessica. Hi, Travis.
Hey, Bill.
So good to see you again. Thank you, Jessica, for your wonderful presentation. You're truly an inspiration. Trump was born with his Saturn at 23 Cancer, directly opposite Saturn-Pluto. Do you have any reflections on the significance of this personal transit for him in terms of his individual journey? And is there any hope for him? And also the significance of his collective role on the world stage.
Bill, you're a heavy hitter, man. You're gonna drop the T-bomb here on me at the end. I love it. Good to see you, Bill. I'll just be very brief about this one. Maybe I'll do a podcast around it, but there's always hope, Bill. Always hope. There wasn't hope, there'd be no point of being here. The Jupiter square Neptune in the sky right now as another world transit really is about that hope. Do I claim to understand what Trump is doing here? No. But I do really like what the literature between Life Between Lives has to say, from especially Michael Newton. Chris talks about this in Dark Night, Early Dawn as well. It's often within the locality of space-time, here, Earth, when we're in a more dual perspective, not the three-eyed raven view. What would Brand say about Trump? That's kind of where I go. It's much more difficult to tell who's a sinner, who's a saint, and oftentimes it's a mixture of it. All I know is he's drawing the poison out of the well, and drawing the poison out of the well that's how we wake up. Pain is one of our best potions to wake up, and he's really doing a magnificent job at doing that. So, Trump is just, in my opinion, a living embodiment or personification of all the bullshit that's been here all along. When I say we're waking up to patriarchy and colonialism, obviously I'm a white chick saying that. People who are more oppressed than I am would be like, girlfriend, that ain't anything new. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. The difference now is white people are like, it's in their face if they're paying attention, and even if they're not. And so my point there is that things like patriarchy or fascism or racism or sexism are becoming so transparent, and they're going to become more transparent. That's the nature of Saturn-Pluto. You can't hide from the shit. That's the whole point of it. So it sucks out the poisons and the toxins in a process of purging and cleansing. That's what Pluto wants. And with Saturn, it's like the establishment, the authority, and so the tradition, the past. So, as far as I'm concerned, our fascist president is just shining a spotlight on the systemic racism and xenophobia that is the truth of this country and our history and our past. And that's what I mean by the best thing that we can do right now is to stop lying to ourselves. Like, this country is built on genocide and the kidnapping and enslavement of Africans, period. And like, until we address that through amends and reparations, which is going to take time, I do not think we have a fighting chance at all of not only continuing to be in the empire of the world, but of surviving as a species. Like, that's the gravity of what we're facing right now. Social justice and ecological justice go hand in hand. They're one of the same. They're two different strands of the same thread. And I think this is what Elizabeth Allison was pointing to in this article on race, trauma, and climate change. Trump's born at the beginning of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 46. So he's also, going to be facing re-election during the height of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It'll be very interesting to see what we, the people, choose to do, which, of course, that's the only one that's going to be choosing what's happening here. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to whether or not we're cut off from our empathy. And we're all empathic beings. It's just a matter of whether or not we're in touch with that. And if we're cut off from it, if enough of us are cut off from it, then he'll be reelected as president. But if enough of us are in our empathy, and that's beyond politics at this point, right? Democrat, Republican, it's so beyond, we're so beyond that. And he played that role. He actually got us beyond the party divide line. So the three-eyed raven would say, looks like he's playing his role. And I guess it's time for us to wake up. Okay, I'll do one last one and then we'll call it a day.
Let's hear from Kat. Kat, go ahead.
Hi guys, hi Jessica. And thank you for doing this. I have been waiting for it for a couple of years now. I feel like this discussion is not complete without a reverse angle. And this is what I want to ask you about. We cannot, sometimes we see clearer if we talk about what is not in the picture as opposed to what it is. We cannot, there are people who define things more from what is missing versus what is there already. We cannot talk about Saturn without talking about Sun. You cannot talk about Pluto without talking about Moon. I would like really to hear how you see this. I mean, is this maybe an opportunity for us to provide our own more than the usual, this timing? Or is this, how do you see this? How do you position yourself with regards to these couple of axes? Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, sometimes we learn better by knowing what's not involved and what is involved. And, generally speaking, my particular mind doesn't often work that way. I've had some students in the past be like, well, tell me what it's not like or what's not happening. And I'm like, oh, shit, I got to really think about that. I don't know, maybe call it a potential foible of my Mercury-Neptune conjunction. But this is just where I'm going to go with it, Kat. And, you can send me an email if this, if you want some kind of clarity, maybe I can talk about it in a future forum. I'm happy to do that. So it's just the beginning of a conversation here. I believe that what the future human is about, in part, that we are currently birthing or dying into, same thing, is a more expanded awareness, maybe a little bit more like the three-eyed raven. By the way, I'm referring to Game of Thrones there. I apologize if you don't watch that, but sorry about that. That's just gonna happen right now. This is the trick. We're human and we attach to things. That's what we do. And if we don't attach to things, we can't fall in love. Falling in love requires an attachment. And when we attach to things, it brings up our fears. It brings up our primal fears because then we get afraid we could lose it. This is why some people don't attach, is because it's so terrifying to do so. And this is why I love Brene Brown again, because she talks about that. Like, if you're gonna love, you're gonna lose. And that's the price that we pay, right? If you're, the Bodhisattva knows that if you're gonna get close to joy in the world, you have to be in touch with the sorrow. The future human for me is one that both honors our solar individual consciousness as unique individuals, because we are. Your soul is yours, my soul is mine. Bam. With its own unique experiences and the continuation of your consciousness from one state of existence to the next. Yet simultaneously true is we are in a lunar form of consciousness where we come, I believe, from the same source, and we return to that source while paradoxically never losing our solar individuality. It's just that when we leave the human form, we tend to, our consciousness, I believe, expands so greatly that what is thought of as an individual here and what is thought of as individuality there is so profoundly different orders of magnitude. So for me, the future human owns both the individual solar self and the lunar dimension simultaneously. And I think that that's a particularly challenging thing to do, but it is probably most likely what these thousands of years of patriarchy have been in service of, which is the birth of the creative individual who can stand at a moment and make a judgment about something outside of itself and make a decision about what it wants to do. And in that process of making that decision, it has agency as a co-creator to change the fate of the future. So for me, that's the gem or the gift that has been inside of this thousands of years of patriarchy. And I think what's challenging right now is that that solar self is so hyperly focused because we've spent so much time with it that it's much more difficult to step into holding that and being simultaneously relational in the lunar sense. Right now, the Saturn-Pluto is conjunct my sun and squaring my moon. So I'm really getting hit by it in the two core parts of my psyche. And it's this profound oscillation between owning my own power and authority and boundaries and then dealing with pretty deep family issues. Because we know that the moon is the family and it's the tribe and it's the community and it's the body. And it's like a snake moving through these two territories. And I think that if I could get a bird's eye view of the process, which I'll do better when I die, I'll see the intelligence of the weaving back and forth between these two places and the greater thing that it's threading in my consciousness and my offering to humanity right now because of that moving back and forth between the solar and the lunar, the individual and the collective, the temporal and the spatial. That requires an expansion of self that I feel is at the growing edge of what it means to be human right now, is to hold that level of awareness in our being, which is for me at this point, because all of us are pioneers in being able to do that, we're breaking that ground. It's pretty exhausting It's pretty heavy, but I know that the people who come after us are going to be able to do it with such easy breeziness. They're not going to even be thinking about it. And that's part of the inheritance that we've had, that we're at in this moment in time, is it's our duty to clear the way for those who come after us to be able to do the things that we're suffering through a lot easier, because, you know, that's the right thing to do. That's how evolution works, and fuck, we're those future people. All right, folks, I got to call it a day. Thank you so much for being here with me. I really want to thank Holly Shabtai and Travis DiRuzza from the Trust Psyche team. You can find Holly Shabtai through Radical Dreamwork, and you can find Travis DiRuzza through Reality Conspires at travisdiruzza.com. And we're a grassroots organization. We're a mom and pop astrology, psychology shop, and it's through your sharing and your feedback and your likes and your subscription to us that our tendrils spread, and we get to come be a part of your world, and you get to come be a part of our world, which is what we love more than anything. And we look forward to seeing you 1 month from today for the continuation of this dialogue, when Travis DiRuzza on June 2nd talks about the transformations of time. And I am very honored that we're going to end on this note of music by Travis, and he's going to sing you away for now. Thank you so much. It's been a complete honor. All my love and blessings to all of you. I believe in us. I wouldn't be here, and I don't think you would either if we can't do this. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I